The year was 2016. My closest friend, Mike, and I, along with his eldest son, Jake, decided to go night fishing at Lake Ridge Reservoir. It was an annual tradition every summer, usually in late July. I always met up at Mike's place, loaded my fishing gear into his truck, and helped him with his so we could head out as soon as possible. I looked forward to this trip every year. It was our way to unwind from long work weeks. Jake was about to begin his final year of high school and was eager to be done with it. At the time, I was only 27 and told him to enjoy life while he could because adulthood wasn't as fun as it seemed. Mike and I had been friends for over a decade, working at the same company the entire time. We treated each other like family, always having each other's backs. As we drove toward our usual fishing spot, I reminded Mike that we needed to grab more bait. He sighed in frustration. "You serious? I thought you already bought some." I shrugged, feeling a little guilty. We made a quick stop at a small gas station in Pinewood, picking up worms and a few extra items before heading back on the road. We played some classic rock, all three of us excited for the night ahead. The drive from the gas station to the reservoir took about 30 minutes, but it felt much longer in our anticipation. As we finally pulled into the grassy area near the lake, we noticed a warning sign that read, "Closed due to wildlife incident." The path leading to the water was covered in shadows as the sun dipped below the horizon, but we didn't let that bother us. Mike and I both carried firearms whenever we weren't at work, so we felt secure. We grabbed our gear and made our way down the narrow path, eager to start fishing. Once everything was set up, the trash talk began about who would catch the biggest fish. Jake was the first to cast his line, boasting that he would outfish both of us. Mike and I just laughed and tossed in our lines as well. A few hours passed, and we were enjoying our usual conversations about cars, women, and work nonsense. At one point, Jake stood up and told us he needed to step away for a moment. I reminded him to take a flashlight since it was pitch black and easy to get turned around. He nodded and disappeared into the trees. Around the same time, we started hearing a distinct knocking sound in the distance. Knock, knock. A shiver ran down my spine. At first, I thought maybe Jake was messing with us, but when he returned, Mike immediately asked, "Would you quit being an idiot out here?" Jake looked confused. "What? I didn't do anything." Then the knocking sound started again, only louder. Knock, knock. I grabbed the flashlight from Jake and pointed it toward the source of the noise. Nothing. Then suddenly something heavy landed nearby. We all turned in the direction of the sound and saw a large rock, somewhere between 15 and 25 pounds. Mike was growing uneasy. "You think someone's out here messing with us?" Jake nervously asked. "Could it be a bear?" I shook my head. Bears don't throw rocks. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I reached for my firearm, preparing for whatever was out there. For a while, the noises stopped, and we thought it was over. I checked my phone, almost 3 a.m., but it didn't feel that late. Then came another knock, followed by a sound I can only describe as a cross between a howl and a scream. It was too close for comfort. Goosebumps covered my arms. "You guys ready to leave?" I asked. Mike and Jake immediately agreed. As we hastily packed up, another rock came hurtling towards us, landing just feet away. My heart pounded as Mike swung his flashlight around, scanning the area. That's when we saw it. About 30 or 40 yards away, a dark figure stood between the trees. It had to be at least 7 feet tall, with glowing yellow-red eyes. Jake's voice was shaky. "Can we please go now?" Mike and I exchanged glances. Whatever this was, it wasn't human and it wasn't a bear. The knocking sounds and rock throwing resumed as we hurried down the trail that ran parallel to the lake. We still had over 100 yards to go before reaching the truck when a loud splash erupted from the water beside us. Something enormous had been thrown in, way bigger than a rock. We froze, scanning the darkness for any movement. Heavy footsteps thudded through the woods, moving fast. Even with our flashlights, visibility was low. Jake whispered, "Do you think this is why the area's closed?" Neither Mike nor I answered, we just kept moving. Then, the unmistakable sound of glass shattering came from up ahead. Panic surged through us. That meant only one thing. Something was at our truck. We picked up our pace, guns drawn, our adrenaline the only thing keeping us steady. The forest around us erupted with more strange noises, loud screeches like an animal in distress. "Mike," I said urgently, "can you start the truck remotely?" He fumbled for his keys, but before he could press the button, an overpowering stench hit us. It was the foulest smell I had ever encountered, like rotting wood mixed with wet dog. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. Then, ahead of us, we heard a deep growl. A loud crash followed, as if a tree had just been slammed against another. Finally, we reached the truck. All 4 windows had been shattered. The awful screeching sound we had heard earlier, we now knew the cause. In the truck bed, a raccoon lay mangled and broken, its body twisted unnaturally. A horrifying sight, but there was no time to dwell on it. We jumped in and Mike started the engine. As the headlights illuminated the woods, there it stood, a towering, dark-furred creature, well over 7 feet tall, stood only 15 yards away. In its hand, it held another large rock, its face twisted in anger. The first thought that entered my mind was, Bigfoot. Mike slowly reversed the truck, but the moment the creature took a step forward, Jake yelled, "Go! Go now!" Mike floored it. As we sped off, a loud thud shook the back of the truck. Something had been thrown at us, hard. We didn't stop, we didn't talk. The entire drive home, we sat in stunned silence, eyes wide, barely blinking. When we finally pulled into Mike's driveway, the floodlights illuminated the damage. The scratches, the broken windows, and the massive rock now sitting in the truck bed. Mike turned to me. "That was real, wasn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think so." Jake didn't say a word, clearly in shock. When Mike tried to explain to his wife what happened, she didn't believe him. She accused him of wrecking the truck after having too much to drink. My wife laughed at me when I told her the story, but we knew the truth. It's 2024 now, and we still haven't returned to that spot. I can't help but wonder, has anyone else had an encounter with that thing? How a birthday celebration went wrong, from Maria. This happened around 3 years back. I'm 17 now, but I still feel shaken when I think about it. It was my birthday, and I live in a quiet town in Pennsylvania. I had about 9 close friends, and I was about to turn 15. I was beyond excited as I prepared for my party. I decided I wanted to celebrate at a cabin deep in the forest. My mom arranged for us to rent a small place out there, which had a kitchen, a cozy living space with a TV, 3 bedrooms, and a bathroom. It was supposed to be peaceful and fun. Before my friends arrived, my mom and I put up decorations, balloons, streamers, and string lights to give it a rustic charm. Just as we finished, there was a knock at the door. I ran to answer it. My cousins and friends had arrived. The moment I saw my best friend, Adrian, I hugged him tightly and welcomed everyone inside, saying, "You all got here just in time." Once we got settled, my mom ordered some pizzas. We ate and sat around chatting. Later, my mom said she needed to run into town. She was hesitant about leaving us alone, but I reassured her we could handle ourselves. I promised to check all the doors and windows before she left. Once she felt comfortable, she took off. We decided to start a bonfire outside and roast marshmallows for s'mores. We laughed and shared eerie stories. Jessica, one of my friends, started talking about a real-life case involving a woman serial killer. We were all joking around, pretending not to be scared. Then, Ben shared something serious. He told us that his parents had recently separated after he came out as gay. While his mother was accepting, his father was not. Things got so bad that his mom had to file a restraining order against his dad because he kept harassing them. As Ben spoke, he looked close to tears. We asked what his father looked like, and he pulled out a photo to show us. A little later, when things had calmed down, we suddenly heard crunching noises in the woods. We were in the middle of nowhere with no neighbors nearby. Adrian gasped, "What was that?" I tried to stay calm and replied, "Maybe an animal?" Alan, the bravest in our group, shook his head. "That doesn't sound like an animal. It sounds like a person walking." I started to agree. It really did sound like footsteps rather than an animal. We tried to focus on our esmores again, but my cousin Ruth had started another story. We got so lost in it that we almost forgot about the sound until we heard it again, this time much closer. At that point, we were too freaked out to stay outside, so we rushed back inside the cabin. I locked the door behind us and secured the deadbolt. To relax, we decided to watch a show before bed. We picked an anime on Netflix and binged through a full season. Then we called it a night. 6 of us got the bedrooms while the rest of us, myself, Adrian, Jessica, and Ryan, slept in the living room. We wished each other good night, and soon, everyone else was asleep. I stayed up a bit, scrolling through social media until my eyes got heavy. Plugging in my phone, I finally drifted off. I had only been asleep for a few minutes when loud banging at the front door startled me awake. All 4 of us sat up, hearts racing. Someone had to check, so I volunteered. The cabin was old and didn't have a peephole. We didn't want to wake the others, hoping it was just an animal or maybe even a lost hiker. But then the sound moved to the living room window. Someone was knocking aggressively against the glass. I dropped down to my hands and knees and peeked through the curtain. What I saw froze me in place. Standing outside was a tall man, probably in his 50s. He was wearing only boxer shorts, no shirt, no shoes. In one hand, he clutched what looked like a hunting rifle. When he spotted me, he grinned widely, a creepy, unsettling smile. Then he waved, as if mocking me, and pointed at the front door, signaling for me to let him in. And then it hit me. I recognized him. It was Ben's father. I let go of the curtain and bolted to my friends, telling them what I saw. Everyone was just as terrified as I was. We rushed upstairs to wake the others. Adrian, Ryan, and I shook Alan and Tim awake. "There's a crazy guy outside the window," I whispered urgently. They snapped awake, instantly alert. When Kai and Ben asked who it was, I hesitated before admitting the truth. "Ben, I think it's your dad." Ben's expression turned to pure horror. Tears welled in his eyes, and he began to panic. Jessica and Tim tried to calm him down, but we were all terrified. Some of the others thought I might be dreaming, but before I could argue, we heard another loud bang on the door. A voice followed, "Let me in, kids." We stood frozen, unsure what to do. Someone had to get a phone and call the police. We decided to move as a group. Tim grabbed his phone, but the signal was weak, and he struggled to get through. While he tried, the rest of us looked for weapons. Jessica and Ruth grabbed kitchen knives. Ben found some pepper spray. I picked up a metal bat, and Adrian pulled out a pocket knife he had on him. Then the banging at the door intensified. Ben's dad was trying to break in. With one final kick, he knocked a hole through the door and screamed that he was going to kill us. Everyone screamed. Before he could reach the lock, I ran up and sprayed him in the face with the pepper spray. He stumbled back, cursing in pain. Ben suddenly yelled, "Maria!" Hit him. I swung the bat as hard as I could, striking him on the head. He collapsed unconscious. We all ran upstairs and barricaded ourselves in a room. Tim still had his phone. I took it and dialed 911. Thankfully, the call went through. I quickly explained what was happening, where we were, and how many of us were there. The dispatcher told us to stay locked in the room and that officers were on the way. We sat there for what felt like an eternity. The front door was broken, and nothing was stopping him if he woke up. Then finally we heard sirens. Flashing lights lit up the cabin from outside. 5 police cars arrived, and officers took him away in handcuffs. He woke up in the back of the cop car. The police checked on us, took statements, and made sure no one was hurt. We were all physically fine, but completely shaken. Since we lived in a small town, word spread quickly. We later learned that Ben's father had found out about the party and planned to kill Ben and all of us. He had been under the influence of drugs at the time. Ben has been in therapy ever since, but I'm grateful for his quick thinking that night. If we hadn't reacted the way we did, we might not have survived. I'm just glad we all made it out of those woods alive. I was around 19 when this happened, and it took place in my quiet hometown in rural Washington. The town's name is Pine Hollow, not that it matters, since you've probably never heard of it. The population is under 1,000, and the town consists of a diner, a bar, a small grocery store, a park, and a post office, all surrounded by farmland. Nothing bad ever really happens there, and just about everyone knows each other. At this point in my life, I was pretty directionless. No job, no car, still living with my mom, and spending way too much time playing video games and getting high. My routine was simple. Sleep in as long as I wanted, get stoned, play games, and then when I got bored, walk over to my friend's house to hang out. I usually stayed there until around 1 a.m. before making my way home. For context, I lived about 2 miles outside of town, while my friend lived in the center. The walk was a bit of a hike, but it was the only exercise I got. I'd put in my headphones, zone out, and just walk until I got home. One particular night, as I was making my usual trek back, I was walking along the main road through town, music blasting in my ears. As I neared the park, I noticed a car sitting alone in the parking lot. That was unusual since the town was usually dead at that hour. I brushed it off, assuming it was just someone passing through or maybe someone taking a break before continuing on their way. By the park entrance, there was a trail leading down to the river with a bench sitting at the start. As I got closer, a man suddenly emerged from the trail. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, judging by his features and the way he dressed. But the weirdest part? He was wearing sunglasses at 1 a.m. He briskly walked past me and sat on the bench, staring straight at me the entire time. The whole situation made me uneasy, but I told myself I was overreacting. I walked at an angle to put more space between us as I passed by. When I glanced at him again, he was still watching me. I hesitated before pulling out one earbud and saying, "Hey, how's it going?" Big mistake. He didn't answer, just kept staring. I picked up my pace, now hyper-aware of my surroundings, leaving one earbud out just in case. A few minutes later, I turned around to check if he was still sitting there. He wasn't. Instead, he was walking behind me, fast, closing the distance. My heart dropped. Maybe he lived nearby, but that had to be his car in the park, so why was he on foot? None of it made sense. I looked back again. He was even closer now, moving faster. Fight or flight kicked in, and I broke into a full sprint. The second I did, he did too. He was chasing me. Thinking fast, I veered off the road, cutting through the trees. I crashed through branches and bushes before diving into a dense thicket, going completely silent. I could hear his footsteps pounding behind me. Then suddenly they stopped. For a few agonizing minutes, we both stayed quiet. I had the terrifying realization that he was listening for me, trying to figure out where I was. Finally, I heard him moving again, back toward the park. I held my breath, waiting until I was sure he was gone. Then, as quietly as possible, I crept back toward the road. I checked both directions before stepping out, my nerves still on edge. There were no streetlights this far out, and I could barely see ahead, but I felt sure I'd lost him. Relieved, I kept walking, now only about a mile from home. I put my headphones back in and tried to calm down, not fully grasping how bad the situation had been. After a while, I noticed headlights behind me. Car was approaching. My stomach twisted in dread. The vehicle slowed as it reached me, then came to a full stop. My heart pounded as I looked up, half expecting to see the man with a weapon, demanding I get inside. But thankfully, it wasn't him. It was a local guy around my age, Jake. He was heading home from a party. "Hey, what's up, man?" I greeted him, trying to sound normal. "Not much. You need a ride home?" he asked. I was an idiot. I waved him off. "Nah, I'm good. I'm almost there. Thanks, though." Jake's expression changed. He cut me off before I could say more. "Are you sure, dude? Because you know someone's following you, right?" My stomach dropped. I whipped around. There he was, the same guy. He was even closer than before. And in his hands, something glinted under Jake's taillights. I had never lost him. He'd been stalking me the entire time, searching for me in the dark. I didn't say a word. I just scrambled into Jake's truck, slamming the door shut. The entire ride home, I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing over how close I had come to real danger. As we pulled into my driveway, Jake smirked and joked, "I probably just saved your life." He wasn't wrong. The older I get, the more horrifying that night becomes. What was that guy's plan? Was he trying to kidnap me? Kill me? What was he doing in Pine Hollow of all places? I'll never know, and I never want to. After that, I stopped staying out so late. I always kept one earbud out when walking alone. It doesn't matter how safe you think your town is or how well you know it. There are dangerous people everywhere. Stay alert. Stay safe. I was on a ski lift just last week with a former US soldier. We got to chatting, and he told me he had spent the past few years living in the remote grasslands of Nebraska. Curious, I asked if he had ever come across anything strange like a Sasquatch, since a friend of mine once had an encounter with one in that state. He told me he hadn't, though he had spent plenty of time tracking buffalo and wolves in the area to study their movement patterns. However, he did share an eerie experience, one that made him feel like he had barely escaped a terrifying fate. Of all places, this happened in Nebraska. There's an old indigenous trade route that cuts through the state, and my new acquaintance, along with a friend, had been hiking along that trail, enjoying the seasonal migration of birds. Then, out of nowhere, the entire forest went completely silent. That's when he heard it. A woman screaming at the top of her lungs, as if she were being attacked. Strangely, his friend didn't seem to hear a thing, even though the sound seemed to echo all around them. "I think my buddy thought I was imagining things," he admitted, but we both noticed how unnatural the silence was. It made no sense since we were standing right in the middle of a major bird migration path. The Kickapoo people still reside in the region, as they were granted land there in 1832. Though that land has been reduced over time, part of the tribe remains to this day. The veteran said he had never been more certain that something, perhaps someone, was trying to lure him into the thick brush to kill him. The most unsettling part? His friend heard absolutely nothing. I asked him if he ever saw whatever was making the sound or figured out where it was coming from. "Not exactly," he replied, "but I kept hearing strange noises. And that night, things got even weirder. We hadn't seen another person for 2 days. I was already on edge, so I had trouble falling asleep. Every tiny noise had me peeking out of my sleeping bag, scanning the trees with my .45 caliber pistol, looking for movement. Then the creepiest thing happened. He thought he saw something, a tall, shadowy figure shift from behind one tree to another. At one point, he believed he spotted what looked like a hand curling around a tree trunk before slowly retreating back into the darkness. When he finally managed to fall asleep, he was tormented by nightmares. He dreamt of running frantically through the brush, getting cut up by branches as he tried to escape something he couldn't see. Just as he'd reach safety in the dream, it would start over again, trapping him in a cycle of terror. After what felt like hours, he woke up drenched in sweat, immediately scanning the area around their camp. But nothing moved. Eventually, the sun rose, and they packed up their things without further incident. But the experience had clearly shaken him. It wasn't until the horror game Until Dawn was released in 2015 that he remembered that night and began to wonder, had they come across one of the creatures whispered about in native folklore? In her book American Monsters, Linda Godfrey recounts the beliefs of the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi tribes. They tell stories of a monstrous being, once human, transformed by greed, cruelty, or cannibalism. The Chippewa in particular warn that acts of selfishness or gluttony can turn a person into a Wendigo as punishment. Descriptions of the creature vary across tribes, but most portray it as an enormous, skeletal predator that hunts those who stray too far into the wilderness. Many accounts describe hearing unnatural sounds, a crying baby, a woman's desperate pleas for help, or a repeated phrase, as if the creature mimics voices it has heard before. Victims often report hearing something like, "Who's there? Please help me. I'm lost. I'm hurt." The instinct to help can lure unsuspecting travelers deeper into the woods, right into the monster's grasp. Another chilling aspect of these legends, The creature can sometimes mimic the voice of someone familiar, maybe even a loved one, drawing a person in before they realize something is wrong. The figure might look human at first, but upon closer inspection, its limbs are too long, its body too thin, its movements unnatural, more beast than man. We spent the rest of the ride discussing other local legends, like the deer woman and shape-shifting witches, all of which are common in indigenous folklore from that region. But what do you think he encountered that night? This happened back in the late 80s when I was 16, a sophomore in high school. My friends and I decided to spend the night camping at a buddy's family property, which we called the Creek Shack. Back then, we didn't really hang out inside much. We mostly camped along the creek bed near the woods. There were around 6 or 8 guys and just as many girls. We were a close-knit group, more into having fun than playing sports. That night, however, I happened to be one of the few who stayed sober, which was unusual for me at the time. Someone had the bright idea to bring a spirit board. I can't remember who owned it, but it was the same one that made its way around our various hangouts. By the time we decided to pull it out, it was pretty late. Most of the girls were already asleep except for me and another girl, Lisa. A few guys were still awake, but they were too busy on their own little adventure, lost in another world thanks to their friend, LSD. Lisa and I lay on our stomachs on some sleeping bags by the fire and set the board down. We asked if anyone was there, and almost immediately the planchette started moving. It spelled out, Trickster. "Oh hey, trickster," I said with a smirk. "What's up?" The planchette moved again, this time spelling Hurtyo. Being the reckless teens we were, we assumed the other was playing a joke, so we didn't take the message seriously. Instead, I decided to mess with it. "Oh yeah," I teased. "And how do you plan to do that?" Lisa and I laughed as the planchette slid across the board. "Eerie, how are you going to hurt me with a tree?" I scoffed. No sooner had I spoken than a branch from the massive oak above us suddenly snapped and crashed down, landing upright between my legs like a spear. We screamed, but instead of stopping, we foolishly continued. After calming ourselves, we moved to the other side of the fire and lay back down. Yeah, it was terrifying, but in our young, reckless minds, it also felt like proof that this was real. So we kept going. "Well, that didn't work," I challenged. "Now what?" The board spelled out FIRE. As soon as we read it aloud, the fire beside us flared up, sending flames leaping toward us. That was enough for us to finally call it quits. We quickly said goodbye and left the board alone for the rest of the night. But the story doesn't end there. Later that summer, my sister and I were hanging out in the back room of our stepdad's workshop with our friends, Mandy and Sarah. The room had 2 bunk beds, a ladder leading to the top bunks, and a cold concrete floor. It was early afternoon when Mandy pulled out the spirit board. We asked if anyone was there and got a response. Yes. We asked a few lighthearted questions, just silly things teenage girls think of, until one of us finally asked for a name. My heart dropped when the planchette spelled out Trickster. Feigning confidence, I said, "Oh, you again? Still trying to hurt me?" The planchette slid to YES. I wasn't in the mood for games this time. I immediately pushed it to GODBYE. We packed it away and went outside to meet up with some other friends. That night, my sister went home with her mom because she had gotten into trouble, leaving me alone in the back room on the bunk beds. As I started drifting off to sleep, I was suddenly jolted awake. I gasped. My entire top bunk was covered in spiders. Hundreds of them. They had spun webs from the head of my bed to the foot, encasing me completely. One was even descending toward my face. Panicked, I instinctively rolled to the side and out of bed, completely forgetting that I was on the top bunk. Somehow, my reflexes kicked in just in time. I caught myself before my head smacked against the ladder below. I scrambled to turn on the light. When I looked back at the bed, nothing. Not a single spider. If I hadn't caught myself, I could have landed on the hard concrete floor and broken my neck, and no one would have found me until morning. To this day, I refuse to be anywhere near a spirit board. Be careful who or what you taunt. You never know what might be listening. On a humid late summer afternoon in Alabama, my husband, our 7-year-old daughter, and I decided to go camping. Instead of choosing a designated campground, we wanted something more secluded. We had heard about an old camping area that had been abandoned for years, no longer maintained or in use. Our curiosity got the best of us, so we set out to explore it. When we arrived, we found the entrance chained shut. The small check-in station stood empty, its windows clouded with dust. With no way to drive in, we had to park our truck along the treeline and carry our gear on foot. A brief hike led us to old, forgotten campsites, weathered picnic tables, crumbling fire pits, and rusted lantern hooks. We kept moving, searching for a spot by the lake. After about a 20-minute walk, we finally found the perfect clearing near the water. That evening was peaceful. Our daughter dozed off early, while my husband and I sat by the fire, taking in the quiet. The stillness was so complete that even the smallest noise felt amplified. And then, without warning, we heard it. Heavy, deliberate footsteps, 6 distinct, forceful steps emerging from the shoreline. It sounded exactly like someone stepping out of the water, trudging up onto land. My first thought was that a park ranger had discovered our truck, followed our trail, and was coming to tell us to leave. But that thought vanished quickly. Had it sounded like any animal, perhaps a deer, raccoon, or even a wild boar, we would have recognized it instantly. But this was different. This was heavy, intentional, unnervingly human-like. My husband, who rarely gets rattled, jumped to his feet. The color drained from his face, and his whole body tensed. A deep, instinctive fear settled in my chest, making my blood run cold. We grabbed our flashlights and scanned the trees, gripping a pocket knife and a sturdy branch for protection. We braced ourselves, waiting for whoever or whatever was approaching. But no one stepped into view. No ranger, no animal, nothing, just silence. That's when the real terror began. A shiver ran through me as I whispered a shaky, "Hello?" into the darkness. Just like in every horror movie where you know the worst is about to happen. No reply. Then, out of nowhere, branches cracked. Not underfoot, but above us. Something was moving in the trees. Pine cones and twigs rained down all around us, snapping against the ground. It sounded like dozens of creatures scurrying through the treetops, but no matter where we pointed our flashlights, we saw nothing. The noises swirled around us, first to the left, then the right behind us, in front of us, from the water, from the trees. There was no pattern, no logic, nothing natural about it. No growls, no animal sounds. Just those eerie, calculated noises that seemed to be playing with us. I felt trapped, exposed. All I wanted was to grab our child and run. But we were deep in the woods, at least 20 minutes from the truck. And the thought of sprinting through the darkness, blindly rushing into whatever was out there, was just as terrifying as staying put. Time blurred. I don't remember how we ended up back inside the tent, huddled around our daughter, waiting for the night to end. But the sounds never stopped. They came in waves, nearby, then distant, then back again, relentless and unexplainable. What could move across land and water so fast? What could be so loud yet remain completely hidden? What could make it seem like it was in every direction at once? The fear was maddening, but that was all it was, sounds. Nothing ever physically attacked us. Nothing ever revealed itself. As the first light of dawn crept in, the noises stopped. Just like that, as if they had never been there at all. Shaken but desperate to leave, we packed up and cautiously walked to the water's edge, searching for any sign of what could have been responsible. There were no footprints, no broken branches, nothing except one strange thing. A massive fallen tree trunk lay near the shore, its bark shredded. Not in a natural way, not by animals or the elements, but as if something had hacked and stabbed at it over and over. Deep, jagged slashes cut through the wood, fresh marks that hadn't been there the day before. I don't know what we encountered that night. I don't know if there's a reason that campsite was abandoned all those years ago. But I do know this, it wasn't normal. It wasn't natural, and I've never been able to explain it. Even now, years later, it haunts me. This all took place when I was 16 years old. I'm 19 now, but I've never talked about it with anyone before. My family and I have always been big on hunting, and we go every season. We usually go after the usual game: deer, rabbits, squirrels, and wild boar. I've always been the one who hunts the boars. The best time to go after them is at night, and it's completely legal. One night, I was in our hunting blind waiting for a hog. I saw a deer and a few possums hanging around. I watched them eat for about 15 minutes until the deer wandered off, leaving only the possums behind. I was getting a little bored when, out of nowhere, the possums scattered like something had scared them. At first, I figured an owl had landed nearby and spooked them. But then I realized something else. It was dead quiet. Too quiet. It was completely silent, which was weird and unsettling. I had my night vision scope, so I started sweeping my .45-70 rifle around to scan the woods. I should have mentioned earlier, there's a deep ditch about 6 feet down, running through our shooting lane. We mostly use it as a natural backstop for bullets in case they go clean through an animal. As I scanned the area, my scope passed over the ditch, but something was off. I saw a pair of glowing eyes reflecting the light. My heart jumped. I thought I'd finally found my hog. I got ready to fire, but as I watched, the thing started crawling up the side of the ditch. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. It wasn't a hog at all. It was climbing with hands, and its head, its face, looked human. I held my breath as it pulled itself up to the top of the ditch and started walking toward the corn we had set out as bait. Its body looked like a man's, but it was covered in thick hair. Right then, I knew exactly what I was looking at: Bigfoot. Now, being the bold 16-year-old I was at the time, I steadied myself and got into shooting position. I aimed for its chest and started to pull the trigger. Boom! The shot rang out. My ears buzzed from the sound, but I felt a rush of excitement. No way had I just taken down a Bigfoot, but through the ringing, I heard something else. A deep, gut-wrenching roar that made my stomach drop. I quickly looked through my scope again, but the thing was gone. I decided to wait until morning before checking if I had hit anything. When daylight came, I left the blind and went to investigate. I reached the spot where I had fired and, sure enough, I found blood. I followed the trail, tracking it for what felt like forever, 2 hours at least. Then I heard it again, the same roar, and then thud. Something heavy hit the ground. Then another thud, and another. I quickly realized what was happening. Something was hurling things at me. Not just any things, huge rocks. That was enough for me. I spun around and got out of there before one of those boulders crushed me. It took me an hour to get back, and the whole time, my heart was racing. I still go hunting, but now I carry an AR-15. It holds way more rounds than my old .45-70 ever did. But one thing's for sure, I don't hunt at night anymore. When this happened, I was 17 years old. I'm a petite girl, standing about 5'3", with light brown hair and green eyes. I have 2 big dogs, Zephyr, a Catahoula Pitbull mix, and Bandit, a Pitbull Lab mix. I regularly take them for long walks along a secluded hiking path, always letting them roam off-leash. One afternoon during our hike, a man came up to me. He looked completely ordinary, about 5'10", with dark brown hair and hazel eyes. He was dressed in a plain black t-shirt and faded jeans. Out of nowhere, he asked if I had a lighter. I told him I didn't smoke, so I didn't carry one. He then looked me over and asked for my name. Not feeling comfortable sharing my real one, I told him my name was Maya. He followed up by asking how old I was, and I answered truthfully, 17. He then asked about my dogs, who were playing a short distance behind me. At first, the conversation seemed normal, and after a few minutes, I tried to continue my walk. But then, he suddenly said he thought brunettes were attractive and that green eyes were a turn-on for him. Feeling uneasy, I pushed past him, my dogs trotting behind me. A while later, I suddenly heard someone yelling, "Maya!" from behind me. I turned to see the same man running up to me, claiming that a woman who looked like me had been calling my name and that he could take me to her. I knew he was lying. My mother and I looked nothing alike, and besides, she would never call me by a fake name I had just given. I told him I wasn't going anywhere with him. At that moment, my dogs, who had been playing with a fallen branch, came closer after hearing the tension in my voice. As I turned to collect my dogs and continue walking, he suddenly grabbed me and pressed something cold and sharp against my back. Everything after that happened in a blur. My dogs started barking like crazy. The man instantly let go, and I heard a painful yelp from Zephyr, followed by heavy footsteps sprinting away. I started to hyperventilate, but my adrenaline took over. I turned to Zephyr and saw he had been stabbed. The man had used a knife not just on me, but on my dog. Bandit had taken off after him, but came back when he realized the man was gone. With all the strength I had left, I hoisted Zephyr over my shoulder and rushed home as fast as I could. Don't worry, Zephyr survived and is doing well now. But after that day, I dyed my hair dark. I couldn't stand seeing my reflection and being reminded of that moment. Even as I write this, I feel the panic creeping in. I still take my dogs for walks, but never on that trail. And later, I found out I wasn't the first girl he had done this to. Please always stay alert. There are truly awful people out there. If you live near Central Texas and go hiking, be extra careful. This man was never caught.